executions of this character take place always.
I really am not going to be imprisoned in the suburbs for having died in the West End. I really don't care. All that I say is that I'm not going to be imprisoned in the suburbs.
Well, the surroundings, I'll admit, are middle class. But, well, the jail itself is fashionable and well-aired, and, well, there are ample opportunities during certain stated hours of the day to take exercise. And in the case of a medical certificate, which is always easy to obtain, the hours can be extended.
Exercise? Good God! No gentleman ever takes any exercise! I don't think you understand what a gentleman is.
Yes, I've met so many of them, I'm afraid I don't. There are the most peculiar varieties of them, the result of cultivation, no doubt. Now, will you kindly accompany me, sir, if it will not be inconvenient to you?
Jack!
Pray be firm, Mr. Worthing.
This is an occasion on which any show of weakness will be out of place. It will be a form of self-deception.
I am quite firm, and I don't know weakness or self-deception of any kind is.
Uncle Jack, I think you have a little money of mine, haven't you? Let me pay this bill. I wouldn't like your own brother to be in prison.
I couldn't possibly allow you to pay this bill, Cecily. It would be absurd.
And then you will, won't you? I think you would be quite sorry if you thought your own brother was shut up. Of course, I am quite disappointed with him.
You won't speak to me again, Cecily, will you?
Certainly not. Unless, of course, he asks me a question. It would be very rude not to answer him.
I shall take very good care that he doesn't ask you any questions. I shall take good care that he does not ask any questions of anyone in this house. The man should be cut. Mr. Grimsby.
Yes, sir.
I shall pay this bill for my brother. It is the last bill that I shall ever pay for him, too. How much is it?
£762, 14 shillings and twopence. Oh, yes, and 5 and 9 pence extra for the cab hired for the convenience of the client.
All right.
I must say, I think such generosity is quite foolish.
The heart has its wisdom as well as the head, Miss Prism.
Payable to Parker and Grimsby, I suppose.
Oh, yes, sir. Oh, and kindly don't cross the check. Thank you. Thank you. Good day. Good day. I hope I should have the pleasure of meeting you again.
I sincerely hope not. What ideas you have of the sort of society your gentleman wants to mix in. No gentleman wants to know a solicitor who wants to imprison one in the suburbs.
It's quite so. Quite so.
By the way, Grimsby, you're not to return to the station in that cab. That is my cab. It was taken for my convenience. You've got to walk back to the station. Very good thing, too. Solicitors don't walk nearly enough. I don't know any solicitor who takes sufficient exercise. As a rule, they sit around in stuffy offices all day long, neglecting their business. You can take the cab, Mr. Grimsby.
Thank you, sir.
The weather's getting very sultry, isn't it, Dr. Chasuble?
There is thunder in the air.
The atmosphere requires to be cleared.
Have you read the Times this morning, Mr. Worthing? There's a very interesting article on the growth of religious feeling among the lay.
No, I was saving it until after supper.
Luncheon is on the table.
Oh, that is good news. I am excessively hungry.
But you have lunched already.
Lunched already?
Oh, yes, we had some pâté de foie gras sandwiches and a small bottle of that champagne that your doctor ordered for you.
99 champagne.
Yes, I thought you would like me to have the same one as yourself.
Well, if he has lunched once, he cannot be expected to lunch twice. It will be absurd.
To partake in 2 lunches in one day would not be liberty, it would be license.
Even the pagan philosophers condemned excess in eating. Ernest Thomas speaks about it with severity. He uses the same words about it as he does about usury.
Dr. Chasuble, would you kindly escort the ladies into luncheon?
With pleasure.
This thundering is
has not been a great success for you, Algy. I don't think it is a good day for Bunbury myself.
Well, there are ups and downs in Bunbury, just as there are in everything in life. I'd be all right if you'd just let me have some lunch. The main thing is that I have seen Cecily, and she is a dog.
You are not to speak of Miss Carton like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You're perfectly ridiculous. Why on earth don't you go out and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who's really staying with you in a week at your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying with me for a week as a guest or as anything else. You've got to go by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If you would stay with me if I were in mourning, I suppose I should think it most unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. Never saw someone take so long to dress and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than being always overdressed, as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden absurd. However, you have got to go, and I wish you a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunburying, as you call it, Algy, has not been a great success for you.
Well, I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. It is all very well, but of course one can't Bunbury when one is hungry. I think I'll join them at lunch.
I promised Uncle Jack that I wouldn't speak to you again unless you asked me a question. I can't understand why you don't ask me a question of some kind. I'm afraid you are not quite so intellectual as I thought you were at first.
Cecily, mayn't I come into lunch?
I wonder you can look me in the face after your conduct.
Well, I love looking you in the face.
But why did you try to put your horrid bill on poor Uncle Jack? I think that was inexcusable.
I know it was, but the fact is I have a most wretched memory. I quite forgot I owed the Savoy £762, 14 shillings and twopence.
Well, I must admit I'm glad to hear you have a bad memory. Good memories are not a quality that women admire much in men.
Cecily, I'm fearfully hungry.
I can't understand your being so hungry, considering all you've had to eat since last October.
No suppers from a poor Bunbury. Late suppers are the only things his doctors allow him to eat.
I don't wonder that poor Mr. Bunbury is always so ill. If he eats suppers for 6 or 8 people every night of the week.
That is what I always tell him, but he seems to think his doctors know best. He's perfectly silly about doctors.
Well, I don't want you to starve, so I've told the butler to send you out some lunch.
Cecily, what a perfect angel you are. May I not see you again before I go?
Miss Prism and I will be here after lunch. I always have my afternoon lessons under the yew tree.
Or can't you invent something to get Miss Prism out of the way?
Do you mean invent a falsehood?
Well, not a falsehood, of course, simply something that isn't quite true but should be.
I'm afraid I couldn't possibly do that. I shouldn't know how. People never think of cultivating a young girl's imagination. This is the great defect of modern education. However, if you happen to mention that dear Dr. Chasuble was waiting somewhere to see Miss Prism, she would certainly go to meet him. She never likes to keep him waiting, and she has so few opportunities of doing so.
What a capital suggestion!
I didn't suggest anything, Cousin Ernest. Nothing would induce me to deceive Miss Prism in the smallest detail. I merely pointed out that if you adopted a certain line of conduct, a certain result would follow.
Of course, I beg your pardon, Cousin Cecily. Then I shall meet you here at 3:30. I have something very serious to say to you.
Serious?
Yes, very serious.
In that case, I think we'd better meet in the house. I don't like talking seriously in the open air. It looks so artificial.
Then where shall we meet?
The dog cart is at the door. You've got to go. Your place is by Bunbury. Cecily! Cecily, don't you think you ought to go back inside with Dr. Chasuble and Miss Prism?
Yes, Uncle Jack. Goodbye, Cousin Ernest. I'm afraid I shan't see you again, because I shall be having my lessons with Miss Prism in the drawing room at 3:30.
Goodbye, Cousin Cecily. You've been very kind to me,
Algy, you've got to go by the 3:50.
I can't go just yet.
Bunbury is extremely ill and your place is by his side.
I haven't had my second lunch yet. And you will be pleased to hear that Bunbury is feeling very much better.
Cicely, you are again writing in your diary. I think I've had occasion more than once to speak to you about that morbid habit of yours.
I am merely, as I always do, taking you for my example, dear Miss Prism.
When one has thoroughly mastered the principles of bimetallism, one can then lead an introspective life. Hardly before. I must beg you to return to your political economy.
In one moment, dear Miss Prism. The fact is, I've only chronicled the events of today up to 2:15, and it was at 2:30 that the fearful catastrophe occurred.
Pardon me, Cecily. It was exactly at 2:45 that Dr. Chasuble mentioned the very painful views held by the primitive church on marriage.
I was not referring to Dr. Chasuble at all. I was alluding to the tragic exposure of poor Mr. Ernest Worthing.
I highly disapprove of Mr. Ernest Worthing. He is a thoroughly bad young man.
I fear he must be. It is the only explanation I can find of his strange attractiveness.
Cecily, let me entreat of you to not be led away by whatever superficial qualities this unfortunate young man may possess.
Now, believe me, dear Miss Prism, it is only the superficial qualities at last. Man's deeper nature is soon found out.
Child, I do not know where you get such ideas. They are certainly not to be found in any of the improving books that I have procured for you.
Are there ever any ideas in improving books? I fear not. I get my ideas in the garden.
But that you should certainly not be so much in the open air. The truth is, Cecily, you have fallen lately into the very bad habit of thinking for yourself. Give it up. It's not quite womanly. Men don't like it. Mr. Worthing, I thought, I may say I was in hopes that you had already returned to town.
My departure will not be long delayed. I have come to bid you goodbye, Miss Cardew. I have been informed that a dog cart has been already ordered for me. I have no option but to go back again into the cold world.
I hardly know, Mr. Worthing, what you can mean by using such an expression. The day, even for the month of July, is unusually warm.
Profligacy is apt to dull the senses.
No doubt, I am far from defending the weather. I think, however, it is only my duty to inform you, Miss Prism, that Dr. Chasuble is expecting you in the vestry.
Vestry? That sounds serious. It can hardly be for any trivial purpose that the rector selects for an interview a place of such peculiarly solemn associations. I don't think it'd be right to keep him waiting. Cecily?
It would be very, very wrong. The vestry is, I am told, excessively damp.
True! I had not thought of that. Dr. Chasuble is sadly rheumatic. Mr. Worthing, we shall probably not meet again. You'll allow me, I trust, to express a sincere hope that you will now turn over a new leaf in life.
I have already begun an entire volume, Miss Prism.
I am delighted to hear it. And do not forget that there is always hope for even the most depraved. Do not be idle, Cecily.
I have no intention of being idle. I realize only too strongly that I have a great deal of serious work before me.
It is as it should be, dear.
This parting, Miss Cardew, is most painful.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can adore with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Miss Cardew, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd love to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is very simply a young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you'll order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down dictation. I've reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell cough.
Miss Cardew, ever since 12:30 this afternoon, when I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have not merely been your abject slave and servant, but soaring upon the pinions of a possibly monstrous ambition, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
Please say that all over again. You speak far too fast and far too indistinctly. Kindly say it all over again.
Miss Cardew, ever since you were 12:30, I mean, ever since it was 12:30 this afternoon, when I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty.
Yes, I've got that. All right.
I have not merely been your abject slave and servant, but soaring upon the pinions of a possibly monstrous ambition, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I've not taken down hopelessly. It doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
Oh, it's at the beginning of an entirely new paragraph. All should be followed by a note of admiration.
It is the beginning of an entirely new existence for me, and it shall be followed by such notes of admiration that my whole life shall be a subtle and sustained symphony of love, praise, and adoration combined.
No, I don't think that makes any sense at all. The fact is that men should never try to dictate to women. They never know how to do it, and when they do it, they always say something particularly
I
foolish.
don't care whether what I say is foolish or not. All that I know is that I love you. Cecily, I love you. I want you. I can't live without you. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?
Oh, you've made me make a plot. This is the only real proposal I've ever had in all my life. I should like to have ended it neatly.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell her to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same
I
hour.
don't care about Jack. I don't care for anyone in the world but you. Cecily, I love you. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
The last 3 months?
3 months old with a few days. It will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
I didn't know.
Very few people nowadays ever realize the position in which they are placed. The age is, as Miss Prism often says, a thoughtless one.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. When was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you one evening in the garden. The next day I bought this little ring in your name. You see, I always wear it, Ernest, and though it shows that you are sadly extravagant, still I have long ago forgiven you for that. Here in this box are all the little presents you've given me from time to time, neatly numbered and labeled. This is the pearl necklace you gave me on my birthday. Here is where I keep all your letters.
Letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. Remember it only too well. I grew tired of asking the postman every morning if he had a London letter for me. My health
nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Men seem to forget very easily. I should have thought you would have remembered the violent letter you wrote to me after I danced with Lord Kelsey at a county ball.
But I did take it all back, didn't I, Cecily?
Of course you did. Otherwise I wouldn't have forgiven you. Or accepted this little girl's bangle with a turquoise and diamond heart and sent me the next day.
Did I send you this, Cecily? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Oh, yes. You have wonderfully good taste, Ernest. I've always said that of you. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life.
My own one. So, we've been engaged for 3 months, Cecily.
How the time's flown, hasn't it?
I don't think so. I found the days very long and very dreary without you.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair grows naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
Now, you'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. Besides, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence.
But,
I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
my dear child, you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
It ain't implied the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who get to the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, could you not love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I shall not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I expect, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
You must see what's on a most important business.
Oh.
I shall probably be no more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged for the last 3 months, and that I've only met you today for the first time, it seems rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just arrived and is looking for Mr. Worthing. She says it's on very important business.
Is it Mr. Worthing in his library?
I believe Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come in here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. No doubt one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack and some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of him.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. A very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure,
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
if you wish.
Then that is not quite that. Perhaps this would be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside of the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. That's quite as I think it should be. You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh no, I live here.
Oh. Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. Strange she never mentioned to me that he had a ward. A secret about him. It grows more interesting hourly. I'm afraid I cannot say that this news fills me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I feel bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but express a wish that you were, oh, well, just a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly.
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than unusually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men in the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples that I refer to. Indeed, if it were not so, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never told me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. But now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. And it would have been terrible if a cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is bound to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Dear Cecily, I'm afraid there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear on the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it were to cause you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.